Okay, so the recording is on for posterity. So yesterday, the Torah portion was actually a double one, Tazria and Metzora. Most of the portion, except for the very beginning, is one topic. The very beginning is discusses a different topic and but different but similar, as we'll explain. So the Torah opens up and it says that when a woman gives birth, Doc, this is your bailiwick. When a woman gives birth, if it is to a male, she is impure, and we'll talk about that in a minute, for 7 days. And if she has, and the boy, if it's a male, right, if it's a boy, he should have the circumcision on the 8th day. Then for 33 days, she's basically she's not pure yet, and she has to wait for 33 days. Then she goes to the holy temple, offers up a sacrifice, and then she's pure and she can resume relations with her husband. If it's a girl, the Torah tells us it's no longer 7 days, it's 2 weeks, it's 14 days, and she has to wait 66 days before she offers a sacrifice and then resume normal relations. So during that period of time, there is the woman obviously is healing anyway, but there's the woman is considered impure. So we're going to tackle a few things. First of all, on the 8th day, a child gets a bris. You should circumcise the flesh of his foreskin. So a few things. One is that, and we discussed this before, that the reason why we wait until the 8th day is for two reasons, actually. One reason is you want the child to live over a Shabbat, because if it's on the 7th day, he will not necessarily live over a complete Shabbat. And so you want him to experience a Shabbat. Secondly, is the number 8 is transcendental. The number 8 is 7 days of creation. 8 days is you take the number 8 and turn it sideways is infinity. And that is so because Kabbalistically, 8th day is infinity. It has nothing to do with creation. So the fact that a child gets a bris at 8 days old, when the child completely lacks understanding, he lacks commitment, he doesn't give permission, it's all above his pay grade. It's above his intellectual pay grade, his spiritual pay grade. All we know is that we create a bris, we create a bond between him and God. So we would think that it is much better to wait until the child has some understanding, 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, bar mitzvah, then give the bris, which Muslims do. The Jews, we give it on 8 days. And the reason we give it on 8 days is because it's nothing to do. This bond with God is supra-rational. It has nothing to do with our understanding. Our understanding is finite. God is infinite. We'll never get it. So therefore, this bris is done when the child is yet a baby, where the child's intellect is not mature, because it doesn't matter if it is mature. The bond is above anything else, any of understanding, any of our comprehension. So we have to wait. We wait 8 days. The child doesn't understand, and it also teaches us sacrifice, right? As parents, we have a boy, it's kind of a little difficult, right? You have a boy and the child with the baby's crying and the mother is cutting, and there's and Dr. Goldman does this daily, so maybe it doesn't bother him as much, but maybe for his kids it did. But for me, it was like a pit in my stomach. Even for my grandkids, a pit in my stomach. But that's it. It's sacrifice, and that's what it takes to be a Jew. And we teach that early on. That it takes sacrifice. Now, the word bris, by the way, the actual word bris, covenant, is the numerical value of the word bris is 612. So with this, doing this one mitzvah, you are connected to God in the 612 other mitzvahs. If you lack this mitzvah, then you're not even connected to God to the 612. Right? It's interesting because somebody who does not have a bris is not a full-fledged member of the Jewish people. I'm not going to call him not Jewish because that's not accurate. But it's not a full-fledged member. It's not a full card-carrying member. If we know someone does not have a bris, technically we do not call them to the Torah. Every Jew gets called to the Torah. But if we know, we don't have to ask, we don't have to examine prior to someone getting an aliyah, Lenny. But if we know, we shouldn't call the person to the Torah. There's arguments. If a person doesn't have a bris, can they be counted in the minyan? So these discussions are because the covenant is not there. The Jewishness is there. But the one thing you're asked, the one mitzvah you're asked to do before bar mitzvah, is you haven't done. And therefore the halakha is very clear. If a child does not get a bris, and the parents do not get the beth in the court of law, the court of law has to, the Jewish court of law has to try and convince the parents. If they can't convince the parents, then they have to give the child a bris on his own. Now, that would work well in the times of the temple. You try and give a child a bris without the consent of the parents, you can end up in prison. So it doesn't practically happen where you give a bris without the consent of the parents. However, when the child becomes of age of majority, I'm not even talking about bar mitzvah because he's still under the parent, but when the child is emancipated, then the child is obligated at some point to go to the Beis Din and say, please give me a bris. More and more, speak to parents who they tell me they're going to let the child choose. That is such a mistake. It's really first of all, it's stupid. It's asinine. It's deleterious. Which child at 18 or 21 in college is all of a sudden going to say, I'm going to get a bris? Which child is a week before their wedding to say, I'm going to get a bris? It's just short-sighted. And it's harrowing. It's a parents who tell me that, it actually makes my stomach, my stomach curdle. So very interesting, by the way, at a bris, there's a line that we say that just as Yikonis, the bris, just as the child is entered into a bris, Yikonis the Torah l'chuppah l'masim tovim, may he enter into Torah, chuppah, marriage, and masim tovim of good deeds. And essentially the message is, just like this child had this bris without his consent, so too may this child be inculcated into Torah from a young child. So the child doesn't even have a chance to say, oh, I've never learned Torah. Chuppah, a child shouldn't say, I don't want to get married, but rather let it just happen. Good deeds, let it just happen. Once the human mind and the human conscience gets involved, human consciousness gets involved, it can become tricky. So we say, just like this happened, so too may everything else happen without his own self driving him crazy. Now, moving on, Tuma, Tame, purity, impurity, what is this all about? So essentially nowadays, we do not really have this concept. We have it minimally, but we don't have this concept when we had the Holy Temple. When we had the Holy Temple, they had this concept of purity and impurity, where certain things, if you touched, you became impure. You had to go to mikveh and wait for sunset, and you were pure. Certain things, if you touched, you had to wait 7 days until you became pure. And if you were a leper, if you had gonorrhea, if you you touched the carcass of an animal that was not slaughtered, but rather was shot or died naturally in the field. It's an animal that was slaughtered is actually, there's no impurity. If an animal was slaughtered properly with a blessing, even if it was found afterwards that the animal was not kosher, it wasn't blood, or the lungs were, it's still, there's no impurity. It's if an animal was shot or a bow and arrow, then that carcass is impure. And there's certain restrictions. You couldn't go to the holy temple. You could, if you were a Kohen, you could not eat the holy, the truma, the tithings that you got from the holy temple, or you got from the Jewish people as they're tithing to you. If you were Kohen, you couldn't work in the holy temple until your until you went to mikveh after the prescribed time. Different, it's very complicated. So nowadays we don't have it. Interesting to note is that when it's brought down in the Mishnah that 3 times a year the Jews made pilgrimage, right? Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And when they used to make pilgrimage, they in Jerusalem they used to actually clean the streets from any dead bugs, because if you stepped on a dead bug, you couldn't no longer make pilgrimage. So they used to wash and clean the streets, and people used to walk and away from sidewalks. They used to walk in the street because that was the safest place to walk. And they didn't have metal vessels. They used to take stone vessels, stone bowls, stone cups, stone spoons cannot become impure. So it was very big back then. The only thing and by the way, it's all spiritual. It's all spiritual. It's nothing. It's no dirt. It's nothing like that. It's not become filthy. Mud is not impure. So it's nothing to do with hygiene. It has to do with a spiritual quality that you have, and that you have to remain pure. It is for this reason, even today, we have cemeteries with monuments. It's not only as a marker, this is where this person was buried, it's also to let somebody who's a Kohen know, a Kohen even today has to stay 7 feet away from a grave, that there's a grave here. So if a Kohen if you didn't put a marker up, a Kohen could by mistake step on a grave. Now, even though there's no temple for the Kohen to run to right now, but nonetheless, the Kohen is not allowed to consciously go near a grave. He has to stay 7 feet away even today. So we put up a marker. I'll tell you an interesting, on the Jackie Robinson Parkway, there's when they made the Jackie Robinson, the reason why the Interborough Parkway is so curvy and dangerous is because both sides of the Jackie is cemeteries. Now, a Kohen, many Kohanim, when they drive down the Jackie, they make sure their windows are closed. So that way they're in their own vessel. Because if the windows are not closed, the concern is that the tree from this side and the trees from this side, and they do, by the way, I looked, they create a almost like a tent like. And so if they kept the windows open, they would become impure. So a Kohen, when they do drive down the Jackie, they keep their windows closed. So that's a Kohen. Another impurity we have today is a woman when she menstruates. When a woman sees blood, whether it's a one-time event or whether it's her flow, her time of the month, and Dr. Goldman knows this well because of his profession, because of the ladies, the Jewish ladies that come see him, especially the Orthodox ladies that come see him. He knows this well. That when a woman, once she sees blood, not on her finger, but once she sees blood from the source, as it's called in biblical language, then she is tamei, she's impure. She's impure. And there's a period of separation of 5 days until her flow ends. Even if the flow lasts 2 days, it's still 5 days. Even if the flow lasted 1 day, it's still 5 days. And then you have 7 days of no blood whatsoever after the 5 days. And then she goes to mikveh, and then she's considered pure. Now, to prove to you it has nothing to do with any form of purity, any form of, it's not dirty or not, is before a woman goes into mikveh, she has to shower and bathe. So she goes into the mikveh squeaky clean. So the mikveh is not for hygiene purposes. It's for purity purposes. The Torah tells us that 40 sa'ah, which is about 80 gallons of water, makes a person pure. That's what a mikveh is. So, and there's a couple of different mikvahs. You can dunk in the ocean, you can dunk in a river, you can dunk in a lake if it's not man-made, or you can dunk in a mikveh. And the mikveh, you have to make sure that an ocean is moving, a river is moving, a lake, you have to see what type of lake it is. But a mikveh cannot move, so that's why the mikveh is made with such. And my mikveh has two, not one, but two boxes of 16 inches of cement. One box, the inner box, and then there's an outer box, because the cement shifts and settles. So in case it cracks, you have another box to protect it of 16 inches of cement. And so to make sure that you have no leaks, you have to test it once a year for leaks, etc. And so it's 40 saw, 80 gallons. My mikveh is 200 gallons. And a woman goes in, because if you do 80 gallons and a woman comes out, then there may be 79 gallons, and because she has water in her body. So we do a lot more. And then she's pure. So nowadays you do have this concept of the purity and impurity, but it's not like it was in the Holy Temple. Now, why do we have this concept of menstruation? Why is a woman considered impure just because she menstruates? So it's not, once again, it's not because of, oh, that's dirty, that's gross, it's disgusting. It's nothing to do with that. It's because there was a loss of life, a potential loss of life. When a woman menstruates, it means that the egg was not fertilized, and it means that the egg is now flushed out of its system. The unfertilized egg is flushed out of its system, which means that the life that potentially the egg had is lost. So it's just like when you lose a life, you're impure. As we said earlier, a dead body is impure. And a Kohen can't go near a dead body unless it's for their closest relatives. So too, when a woman has a period, right? And this is the same reason why a man must not when a man climaxes, a man cannot climax outside of the woman, because that's considered impure. Climaxing, ejaculating inside is there's no impurity there. Outside there is impurity for the same reason, loss of potential life. So with a woman, it's 33 days. With a man, it's with a woman, if she has a male child, it's 7 days and then 33. If it's a female, it's double that. Why? Because it's to teach us a profound lesson. The woman just gave birth to a girl who's going to have loss of life as well. And because she's going to have loss of life, we reflect on that this girl is going to, please God, grow up and have children of her own, and have her own period, and have her own time in the month, and you know, for the times that this egg is not fertilized, there's a loss of life. So therefore, it's just a reflection, a meditation, but it's a biblical one, that a woman gave birth to a girl. This girl, it's kind of you factor in. I'll tell you something interesting I read. Maybe Dr. Goldman can have some input. That when a woman is born, she has all her eggs. So basically, when a woman is born, she has her children in her already, and her children have their children in her already. So that bond is incredible. It's not that she develops an egg later. She has it. She has it when she's born, which to me is so powerful. So she offers a sacrifice after the prescribed time, 33 days, 66 days. And the reason why she offers a sacrifice, it's actually a sin offering. Why? Because during labor, a woman makes certain things or verbalizes certain things. I'm never going through this again. I'm never going to have another kid. I'm not doing this again. Or she curses, or she says, I'm not having sex with my husband again. So because she has these thoughts, and because she has she verbally articulates things that she doesn't mean, she has to offer up a sacrifice. Nowadays, we don't have a sacrifice, but what we do is a woman, after this prescribed time, a woman comes to shul, and she sits in shul and she gives a thanks offering to God. That's what we do these days. I guess when the Holy Temple is rebuilt, we'll see what happens. I don't know. So that's the first part. The rest of the parsha is all about leprosy. And the Torah tells us that leprosy is pure and impure. It's the same idea of pure and impure that we have with the woman who gives birth, the menstruating woman. But here it's to do with leprosy. Now, leprosy is a sickness. It's a disease of the skin. That's not what we're talking about here. Leprosy here, we call it leprosy, but really it's the wrong term. It should be, the Torah calls it saras. Saras we loosely translate as leprosy, but it's really not. Saras is saras. What is saras? Saras is a physical response to a spiritual malady. The Torah tells us that saras can come for a couple of reasons. The main one is lashon hara, slandering, scoffing, talking about somebody else, putting somebody in a bad light. Right? Gossip. I don't know what it is. So putting somebody in a bad light. Right. That's the first main reason. The second thing can come from cheapness, stinginess. And the third reason is haughtiness, when a person is arrogant. These are the reasons one can get saras. And the Torah starts talking about saras on one's body, then saras on one's clothes, and then saras on one's houses. Right? There's something like a mold on one's house on the outside, white or yellow or green. But truth be told, it first starts on the house. And if a person does not pay heed and change their ways, it then comes on the clothes. And if a person does not listen to that warning, it then comes on the body. So, and when it comes on the body, and this is how the Torah begins, is the person has leprosy. And there's different types of leprosy, but basically what it is, that part of your skin on your body turns white. Almost like a blemished white. But the hairs, right, and the hairs turn white also. It's not the hairs remain black, because that could be that you have, a skin ailment, but the hairs turn white, and they turn white temporarily. So then that is possible leprosy. Now here's the interesting part. The person goes to a Kohen, and the Kohen looks at it, and the Kohen says, either three things the Kohen could say. Impure, in which case that person is isolated, ostracized, quarantined, and the person cannot live in civilization. The person has to go to the desert outside of the camp, has to bring a shovel, and has to bring some food, and is there for 7 days. And the idea is that, look, you created havoc. You created bad feelings between two business partners, husband and wife, two people, because of your gossip, because of your slander. Now you're going to have to reflect on it. And just like you caused a rift between these two people and you separated these two people, you're going to have to be separated as well. They take a shovel, obviously, to cover the excrement, take food, and you sit. You're in solace. You're in solitary confinement. You pitch a tent, and that's where you are. So he can say you're impure. He can say, nope, this is absolutely not tzaras. It doesn't have that character of tzaras. It's a different type of white, or the hairs remain black, right? Or he can say, I don't know. Because I don't know, the person has to could live in the house, but quarantine. He doesn't come out of the house, but he can live with his family. And then the Kohen comes a week later. The Kohen comes a week later, and the Kohen takes a look, and then the Kohen can say three things: impure, yeah, this is impure, out. Go to the desert, uncivilized portion of where people live, where people do not live, or you're pure. In that case, you're fine. Just go ahead with your life. Or generally, and I don't think this happened where you had to lock him up again and come back a third week. So here's the interesting part. It was a Kohen. A Kohen was the one who said you were pure or impure. If the Kohen had no idea, if the Kohen looked at it and said, I have no clue, I don't know these laws. You called me, I don't know these laws. So what you do in that case is you bring a sage. If the sage is not a Kohen, the sage can look at this guy and say, you're impure. And you know what? He's not impure. Impure, it means nothing if the sage says it. Even if the sage is known to be the maven, he knows leprosy like tzaras like nobody else. The Torah gave this to the Kohen, not to the sage. So what has to happen is the sage whispers in the Kohen's ear, and the Kohen says, "Yep, that's tzaras," and the person is then quarantined. Or he says, "No, that's not tzaras." Why? Why can't the sage do it? So the reason given is that a Kohen, Aaron the Kohen, and his children who have his DNA, was a peacemaker. He was a man of love. And he spent his life repairing marriages, repairing friendships. And the Torah says, how fitting is it for him, who's so full of love, to be able to, because God knew that he would err on the side of caution. He wouldn't be flippant and say, yep, you're a leper, out. He would really cogitate and look at the whole picture. And that's why a sage who's not a Kohen had no say. In fact, even today, right, when the Kohen, we just pass over, the Kohen in Shul, they blessed us. What is and they, may the Lord bless you and guard you, may the Lord, but what was the blessing they make before? They go, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, who commanded us with his mitzvahs to bless the Jewish people, bi'ahava, with love. Any Kohen, and this is halacha, this is law, practical law. If you're a Kohen and there's somebody in that congregation who you hated, despised, you are not allowed to bless the congregation because it's not true love. If you have an extra ground with somebody, go to another shul and bless them, or stay in the shul and don't bless. So a Kohen has the extra ability to love, and that's why it was given to a Kohen. Now, the Kohen they talk about this because of the way it's worded. Is it says the Kohen should look at the affliction, then the Kohen should look at the person and give his diagnosis, his DX. We learn from here that if it's, for example, the first Seder night, the person runs to the Kohen, calls the Kohen, whatever, and says, take a look. And it's tzaras. The Kohen has the freedom, and the Kohen should, because it's Yom Tov, to say, No, no, no. Come to me after Yom Tov. I'll take a look. I don't think it is. And it's not. And if the person had to be set straight with isolation, it would still be there after Yom Tov. So if it was a groom in his 7 days, if it was Yom Tov, if it was a Shabbos, if a person had just lost a parent, the Kohen could use his noodle and look at the big picture. And as long as he doesn't say tame, impure, as long as he doesn't verbalize it, where he brings it into the world of action, then it's not impure. The minute he says tame, it's tame. He could say, I don't know, you know what, come to me in a few days. Come to me when your Sheva brachas are over, your celebration of marriage is over, and talk to me then. So Kohen has the ability. So the Kohen takes a look, and there's different types of shechem, different colors, etc. It can happen on the hair, by the way, on the beard, or the, right? It can happen on the clothing, etc. Here's an interesting halach. A person shows a white patch on the person's body, or multiple white patches on the person's body, and the Kohen looks at it and says, "Yeah, it's haras. You got to isolate." But then the Torah says, if his white patch from head to toe, then he's pure. The question is why? Why? So the answer given that I saw is that once again, saras comes because of a failing. The person's either a gossiper, is stingy, or is haughty. And it's a character flaw. So people know when you have tzara, stay away from this guy. Right? Until he mends his way, stay away. Now, the tzaras could be hidden. It could be in somebody's back. It could be in somebody's shoulder. It's covered. When you have tzaras from head to toe, you ain't hiding. So you cannot, is pure because people know what he is. So you don't have to isolate because people are going to ostracize you. Right? So you're pure because you've been taught a lesson of hard knocks here without you going into isolation. By the way, if a Kohen, if an MD, and this is the halacha, if an MD told a Kohen, that's saras, and the Kohen says, I don't think so, and the MD says to the Kohen, you're an idiot, it's saras, and the Kohen says, I don't think so, then it's not saras. Just like a sage can have no input. It doesn't matter what the sage says, it's a matter what emits from the Kohen, likewise even an MD. So the person has saras, and it could be green, once again, it could be red, it could be a blister, it could be a boil, but it has to fit certain parameters. And then the person had to either quarantine or he had to stay in his house, etc., etc. And there's all these particulars, and they're pretty tough halacha. When it's on the clothing, what you do is you let's say it's on the bottom of the jacket, you go to a tailor and cut that piece out and stitch it, and you wait a week, go back to the Kohen. If it comes back, Kohen says, yeah, it's saras. You've got to burn the coat, the jacket, and go to isolation. Go in the desert. If it's on the housing, you scrape it off, and if it comes back and it's the same deal, then you have to actually destroy the house. Tough stuff. Here now, when you destroy a McMansion in Lloyd Harbor, it's much worse than destroying what their little huts they had in the times of the temple. Right? They're these small one-bedroom cottages, so it wasn't. But if you did have a McMansion, you would have to, and you follow Torah law, you would have to destroy it as well. Now, when that's the first parsha of yesterday. The second parsha pretty much deals with when the Kohen goes again and the leprosy the tzaras has rescinded, it's disappeared. The Kohen says, okay, you are hereby pure. He's not pure. He's not pure until he offers up a certain sacrifice to the Kohen, to the Holy Temple. What they did is the person had to, the Kohen had to take 2 birds. He had to take two birds. And they say, why two birds? Because birds, they chirp constantly. And that's what that person did. And he was just talked and talked and talked and talked and got himself in trouble. Take two birds. You take two types of hyssop and a cedar, in other words, a big vegetation, a small vegetation, which just teaches us arrogance and humility. You dip it in water, holy water from the red heifer, with ashes of the red heifer, and you sprinkle it on the person. Once the water touches that person, then he lets one bird. Then the one bird he slaughters, one bird he keeps alive, and he has to wait 7 days. After 7 days, he is pure. And the seventh day, he has to bring a proper sacrifice to God. He also has to shave his eyebrows. Eyebrows symbolize haughtiness, arrogance. He's always, looking. His mustache, which is basically he talked, and his beard, because his I guess his beard, I'm not sure his beard, but I know around so he had to shave his head. I'm sorry, his head for haughtiness, his eyes because he looked down on somebody, and his beard because the beard is sacred and to teach us that you did something that was so not sacred. And then he on the 8th day, once again, the 8th day again, he brings a sacrifice, and then he's pure, and he can go back to society. Right, so he had to withdraw for a while, and now if the person cannot afford this sacrifice, he can bring a less of a sacrifice. However, if the person is wealthy, they don't let him get away with a smaller sacrifice. It's because don't be stingy. That caused you ailment in the first place. That got you in trouble. So if you're going to be stingy and not offer up to God this a proper sacrifice, you're going to get it again. So we do not let the person be stingy on God's dime, so to speak. I think I told you the story about sometimes stinginess can come from wealth. They tell the story about a person who always used to help out people. He was very philanthropic. The more money he made, the less he helped. The less he helped, the more money he made. And eventually he became so wealthy that he stopped helping. Until one day he was visited by this great rabbi, and he was tickled pink. This great rabbi would visit him. And the rabbi didn't ask him for donation to support this cause or that cause. The rabbi said, "You have a mirror." He goes, "Yeah." He brings this mirror. The rabbi, he said, "Okay, take a look through this glass." He said, "What do you see?" He says, "Oh, I see people, I see the street." "Take a look at the mirror. What do you see?" He goes, "Well, Rabbi, I see our reflection. I see us." The rabbi took the coin and scraped away the back of the mirror. He goes, "Now what do you see?" He goes, "Well, now it's plain glass. I see through it." The rabbi says, "You see, it was the silver that was making you only see yourself. It was the money. Your money caused you to become stingy, and your comeuppance caused you to change." And so the rabbi said the stinginess can really have a deleterious effect on your soul, on your spirit. So the person, he erred, he owned up, and he stopped his erroneous ways, and he became like he used to be. He used to be a giver, so he was a giver. So stinginess is something that is not is frowned upon. Torah tells us here, talks about the house, something I didn't mention. It says that first you scrape it away. If it comes back, you take, before you destroy the house, you take out that section. It's on the one brick, cut out one brick. And probably back in the day, it was plaster, right? You take off the plaster, you take off that stucco piece, and you put back a new piece of stucco. And if it comes back, then you know you've got problems. You have to demolish the house. So you were given ample warning in order to do teshuvah. You had to do teshuvah. If you didn't do teshuvah, you lost your house. And then the last part of the Torah talks about if a man or a woman had an emission. So an emission, it comes from, once again, it comes from, for the woman, it comes from her source. For a man, it comes from his source, right? And it's what today would be considered gonorrhea. I don't know exactly what gonorrhea is. Doc, have you ever had a patient with gonorrhea?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes. Okay. So if a person, they say it's a person has gonorrhea, that's also impurity. It's also because of back then a spiritual ailment, a spiritual wrong that the person did, and they have to go into quarantine. They're impure. They have to bring a sacrifice. Both a man and a woman are equal here, and now it also talks about a woman who has a period, but not in her period time. And the way it works, it's like this: when a woman has a period, 11 days from 11 days once her period stopped, for the next 11 days. Right? If she has any more blood sightings, it's considered the original period. If after 11 days she has a flow, not just a stain, a flow, then that is considered a really dark impurity. That's a sign of a spiritual element. It's not just a natural thing. It's not just a natural menstruation for the woman where she lost the egg, but if it's after 11 days from the time the period stopped, and 11 days later, and she has a flow, and the flow is, but it has to be more than 1 day, that is considered tummy. It's considered impurity. Now, the reason why I tell you this, even though it's kind of not practical now, is the technically speaking, a woman has her period. Biblically speaking, the day her period ends, as long as it's a minimum of 5 days, she can go to mikvah. But if a woman has this one not in her cycle, 11 days after, which is not in her cycle, if she has another period, then she has to wait. She has to wait till the period ends and then count 7 days, 7 clean days. What we do today in Jewish law is we practice 7 days because of this. We want to be careful because we don't know. We don't have Kohanim who are taught this, who go to yeshiva for this, because the Holy Temple is not there. It's been destroyed. So a woman always keeps 5 and 7. But technically, a woman, she bleeds, you keep 5 days. On the 5th, the night of the 6th, she can go to mikvah. But because of this other type of period, we keep 7 clean days, just in case it was the different type of period. And that's what we keep now. And that's universal. That's Ashkenazim, Sfardim, Hasidim. It doesn't matter who, what, when, where. That's what we do. And a woman goes to mikvah on the night of her 8th day after 7 non-sightings of blood. And a woman has to make sure that she doesn't have any staining. Now, the staining, and this is, I took a course, by the way. I took a course of 6 months. When we built the mikveh here, I wanted to be more knowledgeable. So I took a course in basically, and Doc, you'll get a kick out of this, what's considered a halachic problem in staining, what's considered a halachic problem, not a halachic problem in staining. What's considered blood, what's considered not blood. So brown is not blood. Yellow is not blood. Green is not blood. Yeah, right? Orange is not blood. However, brown, light, pinkish brown can be blood. So that's what took 6 months for me to learn, to be able to distinguish between a color that could be a problem, where the woman would have to count her 7 again, to a color that's not a problem. So once a week, I went to this rabbi in Parkway, and we learned the laws, and he brought out his Benjamin Moore palette, and he taught me the laws of blood. What's considered blood? What's considered blood from the uterus? What's considered blood not from the uterus? It was fascinating. It was very complicated, and it took me 6 months to kind of get it. Very few people ask me this. I am asked, to ascertain, but if I get it 5 times a year, that's a lot. Any questions before we?
What about the woman who's menopausal? Are they still going to go to the mikveh?
So a woman is menopausal. She if she's never gone to mikveh before, if a woman has always gone to mikveh, so eventually her mikveh will stop. She'll go to mikveh and then she won't get a period again, and that's it. If a woman has never gone to mikveh, or she went to mikveh but she hasn't kept it lately, then that woman should go to mikveh one more time. Count the 5, count the 7, go to mikveh, and you're done. And you never have to go to mikveh again. So I tell people, 60 years old, but they say, does mikveh apply to me? I said, yeah, one more time. One more time, mikveh applies to you. Go to mikveh, you make the blessing, you go under the water's a purity, the water's a blessing, and that's that. And you have one more time. So mikveh is not just for the bride. A mikveh is actually a monthly thing, where a woman goes to mikveh every month. And unless she's pregnant, if you're pregnant, chances are you're not going to stay. And if you do stay, go to a doctor. And if you do bleed, run to a doctor. But chances are, healthy pregnancy is that you may stay in the beginning, but then you're done. Any questions? Okay, so we will reconvene tomorrow, please God, with our Chai Academy, which is on Facebook. We're going to be talking about, continuing the Holocaust series. That is, we're going to talk about kapos and Judenrats, Jews that did the wrong thing to save their life. Never feel bad for them, but still. God bless. And once again, Chai Academy, chaicenter.com/academy is where all these courses could be found.